What's up, guys? This is CJ, aka The Wolf, coming to you here from the Wolf's Cave. The CFP rankings just came out, and I'm honestly satisfied with it. I have absolutely no problem with it. I have absolutely no issue with it. It's only week one of the CFP rankings in the first week of November, which were we were officially in it this past weekend, but let's just say we're officially in it. As far as now it's time to play some A plus football and see what happens with it. I looked at the top 25, and I'm like I said, I'm satisfied with what I'm seeing from this first week of it being announced. Um my surprises of this is there is no group of 5 team in the top 25 rankings. I mean, when you got a 3-loss Tennessee in there, um I'm trying to think who else. Pretty much just a 3-loss Tennessee, but they're just going to keep them in there because of some of the SEC teams they played that were ranked that they beaten, and even if they lost, it's a good resume like Oklahoma and Georgia and Alabama, I guess. But if I've seen this in recent past with rankings like this, when you lose to teams like that are ranked higher than you, especially if you lost like two games or more to them, you're the spot holders. You're just holding over spots for other teams that um have actually the potential of being higher than them to try to get themselves into the CFP. So as of right now, Tennessee is still in the top 25 for what it's worth, but I call them the spot holders now. Now my biggest surprise is Iowa making the top 25 when they weren't even in the AP polls, and I'm actually okay with this. They have opportunities of actually climbing their way to where they could be in the CFP without even going to the Big 10 championship. Um, and I will get to that in a moment. And then my other big surprise is Utah climbing from number 17 of the AP polls to number 13 in the CFP rankings, which to me is very deserving from, because even though they got their ass beat by Texas Tech by 20 plus, they kept up with them through 3 quarters until the fourth quarter, to where Texas Tech pretty much just smacked them offense, defense, and everything. Um, but otherwise, if you look at their schedule, they beat the crap out of every team that they have played this season that they've won. And I mean, they didn't just beat them; they beat the literal crap out of them by 20 plus. So, I mean, I thought Utah was a pretty damn good team, but what they did on that schedule, even against a couple of ranked teams that weren't BYU or Texas Tech, they beat the literal crap out of them. So they honestly, I'm glad they're much higher than they should be at 17. Um, and then and then I think that's sorry, sorry. But I think that's pretty much it from what I can see from the surprises that I have. Oregon kind of dropping down to 9 is kind of understandable. They did beat Penn State, but now Penn State's out at this point, non-existent. So Oregon hasn't really played enough to where they've proven themselves to be a good team by, I don't know, statistical measures and stuff. But even I test a little bit. Their defense is pretty legit, but their offense, it's so and so, kind of like the Green Bay Packers, if I might say. But they do have an opportunity. They go to Kinnick Stadium this weekend, and then they play USC later on, and then they finish things off against Washington, which I'm glad they made the rankings as well too. So they got a chance to climb up. So now that we got past that, let's go into my Excel sheets that I made that I've been keeping up on even before the CFP rankings came out. Let's get this right. And for anybody watching this, just be patient with me. It is a new laptop after all, so I'm still trying to get used to this, but I'm actually loving this laptop so far. For right now, knock on pencil wood, it has not given me issues. Okay. Okay. So as of right now, these are the current top 25 teams in the CFP that I have right now. And then these are the group of five teams, none of them in the top 25, but that I believe there are remaining to make that opportunity of a CFP. So, like I said, as of right now, I probably 6, 7, 2. Is Tennessee 7-2? Wow, 6-3. Let me get the fix on it. Yeah, it happened all of a sudden, so I'm just trying to make sure everything is good. Okay, yeah, we're good. 7-2. Please. You lost to Oklahoma. We're not going to get into this. Okay. Okay, so as I see right now in these top 25 rankings, there's a multiple amount of teams that can still make the playoffs. It could be pretty much 24 out of 25 teams that still have a chance. Tennessee has a slight chance, but they need Vanderbilt to win out. And it's only going to get a little bit tougher for both Tennessee and Vanderbilt to kind of climb up if there's no chaos, which eventually will be with the SEC because they got like top 10 matchups in the next 2 to 3 weeks probably coming up for them. So the chaos could work itself out to where Vanderbilt and Tennessee could have at least one more chance. If Vanderbilt can find some way into the top 10, while Tennessee's still trying to find an answer to get themselves back into the conversation, that actually work out. But as of right now, I'm looking at pretty much 24 of these teams in the top 25 that are still in line to make the college football playoffs. I'm looking down. I'm looking down the top 25. It looks like a runaway for Ohio State and Indiana to get to the Big Ten championship to fight for the one seed. Ohio State has Michigan, and no matter how good Ohio State has been in the past, in this season anyway, it's always a psychological game with them. I had a conversation with one of the coworkers at my job, and he even thinks so as well too. Like Ohio State could beat Michigan, but at the same time, Michigan has had them for 4 straight games, and you don't know what's going on in their heads once Ohio State has to travel over there. It's just something that's going to be on their mind. Hopefully, Ryan Day kind of rights the ship finally, and I mean, they got one of the best defenses in the nation, and the offense has played pretty well and consistent ever since they got past Texas. So, they could run away against Michigan. Michigan hasn't really been that consistent, but they have been playing. They have been doing their best to battle out to try to get to that position to get themselves into the college football playoffs. But as I'm going down, Indiana is probably going to close out undefeated. Texas A&M at this point, and I'm gonna go right here since it makes a little more sense. I will go right back to this because the group of five has to be mentioned. Texas A&M has Missouri this weekend at Missouri. Missouri is a very tough place to play at Columbia. Columbia, I believe. Yeah, Columbia, Missouri. And not only that, they got a good defense. The only downside to Missouri having to battle against Texas A&M is they're down two quarterbacks. So now they're down to a freshman quarterback. We don't know how they're going to exactly look at this point. So it just comes down to just the trust factor of their defense and their running back just to hopefully give A&M a hard time, but A&M is very good at adapting to these types of situations. So you can't really say Missouri could upset them. It's possible they could, but they need at least a little bit of quarterback play, or it's going to be too predictable for A&M to actually just take them down. So Alabama honestly has at least one more tough slate against Oklahoma in 2 weeks. Unfortunately for them, they have to play LSU prior. And even though LSU is not the same this season and they fired Brian Kelly, LSU still got one of the better defenses in the nation. We have no idea how the offense is at this point. Garrett Nussmeier has been beaten up left and right at this point. The offensive line hasn't really been that good ever since they lost 2 to 3 of them to the NFL. So LSU's kind of struggling at this point, but they are adaptable to Tuscaloosa pretty well. So And as for me as an Oklahoma fan, I'm kind of hoping LSU does wear down Alabama to where once they play Oklahoma, Oklahoma has a chance because Oklahoma has a bye week, so that kind of works for them a little bit. But no, at this point, Alabama should be able to beat LSU. But who knows what's going to happen with that game? We got to see how Alabama is for sure, even though they have been cooking at the right time. Georgia goes to Mississippi State. Doesn't sound like much, doesn't seem like much, but Mississippi State has been a pretty gritty team this season, even though some games they haven't finished, except against Arkansas. Their first SEC win in 2 seasons against that Arkansas that Mississippi State beat. Now Georgia has to go over to Starkville. Georgia has really not been consistent. They have not been good in like the first 2 to 3 quarters consistently. And it has always had to come down to the fourth quarter for them to start stepping up and playing football. They could do the same thing against Mississippi State. This could be the same situation, the scenario. But I mean, there's going to be a point to where if Georgia keeps this up, we got to think about what happened with TCU when TCU was playing these types of games. And then once they got to the national championship, that Georgia team beat the crap out of them whole-handedly without any competition, which was a very huge disappointment of a national championship. Ole Miss is probably going to clean house. They do have Mississippi State like Georgia's dealing with right now this weekend. Ole Miss could clean house and be in the college football playoff without even having to play in an SEC championship game, which is great for them because that gives them a break and they could be prepared to go on a run in the playoffs for sure. But we don't know what's going to happen with Mississippi State. That type of rivalry is just nasty and ugly. It's unpredictable. You don't know what you're going to get. So, like, the Egg Bowl is probably going to be a scrambled one. So, who knows? We'll see how that plays. One of my favorite matchups of the weekend is BYU versus Texas Tech. BYU has a very tough schedule down the stretch with just UCF left. They got Texas Tech at Lubbock, and it's not going to be an easy game for sure. This is probably going to be the toughest matchup that BYU is going to face all season next to Utah. Then they travel out to not travel out. Then they travel back home and host TCU, and I will not take them lightly as well too. They have been a pretty good competitive team. Then they go back out to Cincinnati, but we don't know where Cincinnati is at this point. They got destroyed by Utah, so I mean BYU could go into Cincinnati. It might be a good matchup, but at the same time BYU could easily kind of run away with this if they just kind of keep their mindset whether they beat Texas Tech or not. And then we get to Texas Tech, who hosts BYU, one of their toughest matchups this season. And, you know, Texas Tech beat the crap out of Utah in the fourth quarter. But how will this play out with BYU? Like Bear Bachmeyer is in a good place right now with this team. The entire team itself is pretty balanced, so they could go toe to toe with Texas Tech the entire game, even though Texas Tech is really talented with all those transfers that they brought in. It really comes down to Baron Morton staying healthy because all they have to do is if they can get past BYU, this is pretty much a cakewalk for them to the conference championship. But we can also not count out this being a conference championship preview. Even if Texas Tech beats BYU, BYU could clear out their schedule and just find Texas Tech in the conference championship for round 2 of this. So if they beat BYU, they can clear out their schedule. I would not underestimate West Virginia. I think Tech understands not to underestimate West Virginia since they upset Houston. Oregon dropped down from 6 in the AP poll to 9 in the AP poll. Kind of nice if you think about hearing the 6 and the 9. But they got Iowa, which is one of the toughest stadiums to play in at Kinnick Stadium. I haven't really checked the schedule if it's going to be like in the afternoon or at night. Either way, Oregon needs to come out playing their A+ game. I think they had a bye week last week, so at this point they should be fresh. They should be hopefully locked in for what's going to be one of their toughest matchups. If they survive that one, they got Minnesota, who actually took down Nebraska, who was ranked. And if they survive them, then they got to host USC, who's looking for a playoff spot. And if they somehow survive that, then they got Washington. And my goodness, I think, and I'm like thinking to myself, Oklahoma has a tough stretch down. Oklahoma and Texas has a tough schedule down the stretch. But Oregon, honestly, this is a low key tough stretch for them because they got a young offense. Their defense is experienced. They're good. They're always going to give them a winning chance. But that offense, man, they kind of got exposed like from time to time. Notre Dame should be able to clear out their schedule, but even if they beat the crap out of Navy, there is Pitt that's ranked. And Pitt's a good offensive team. They should not be underestimated. This could be one of Notre Dame's toughest matchups to clear out their schedule to try to get into the college football playoffs. They can't lose another game. And if they somehow lose to Pitt, it's pretty much over. No questions asked unless there's chaos. This is pretty much it for Notre Dame. They just can't overlook them and let Navy think that they have a shot against them because Navy's trying to overcome that loss they had against North Texas, and they really want to try to get after Notre Dame. Uh, and then there's stupid Texas who jumped over Oklahoma as far as from AP to the college football playoff. And yeah, I know Texas won the head to head against Oklahoma. Whatever. I don't give a crap. The fact that they jumped us, you know what? I don't appreciate that. So F Texas. F that freaking team. Arch Manning's overrated. Blah, blah, blah. I don't give a crap. Unbiasedly, they have the strongest chance of not only making it to the SEC title game, but get into the college football playoffs. They have to win out to even get that opportunity. You can beat Georgia, but it won't be enough. They have to beat A&M as well too. They have to close out if they want to get into at least the college football playoff if they come up short, but I would say an SEC title game is something they have to go for because right now at this point A&M is positioned in line for it, and then we'll see what happens with Georgia and Alabama at the end because they could get it. Maybe even Ole Miss. But at this point Texas has to win out to give themselves a remote chance to being in the college football playoff. And if they do that, this would be the biggest bounce back next to Notre Dame from losing two games and especially against Florida as well too, and then coming back, taking care of their business against three top 10 teams in the last 5 weeks of the season. This would be the hugest makeup from their struggles early in the season, but they have to come out playing A+ football the entire way. We get to Oklahoma, who also has a chance to get themselves into a college football playoff at least, but they also have to win out. And one game to give them that shot is Alabama. If they can win at Alabama, this works hugely in their favor with that resume overcoming at not only at Neyland Stadium against Tennessee, but at Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Two of the toughest places to be at. And then I'm going to say one of the I don't know, top four, top five toughest places in the SEC. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. They well, no, never mind, never mind. I thought they were going to go to Missouri, but instead they come to our house, which is one of the toughest places to play in anyway. Missouri, rivalry game, huge rivalry game. If Oklahoma beats Alabama, they cannot overlook Missouri. They can't overthink things. They can't be partying, celebrating. They got to know we beat Alabama. We got a chance. They got to lock in. So now they got Missouri, who got them at the very last second of that game. And I would say Oklahoma, I would look to get revenge on them. And then at the same time, not only do they got to beat one Tiger, they got to beat LSU as well too. They get them at home as well after getting stomped on last season at their place. Now they have LSU at home. They can close things out with a struggling offense, and with Oklahoma's defense playing as well as they are, they got to get after Garrett Nussmeier and company if they survive this long and just crush them and put themselves in that CFP spot, not having to worry about anything. If they can close it out just like Texas, they got one of the better resumes to work in their favor down the stretch. It's best to lose early before playing well and winning out late, because if you lose late, it's going to be much harder to keep yourselves in, and that is the honest truth of it. Utah, I'm rooting for them as much as I'm rooting for BYU to get into the college football playoff. Impressive win last week. Um, I I don't remember who they played. There's a lot of teams that I had to go through, but they had an impressive win last week. No problem. They've beaten the crap out of every team that they have played that they have won, except Texas Tech and BYU. They're both in the top 10. Still good resume builders for Utah, along with the wins they've had, especially against a couple of ranked teams that they beat the crap out of. All they got left after the bye is at Baylor and at Kansas. Kind of don't take it too lightly. It's kind of a tough place to play in the Big 12 at this point. And then they got Kansas State. Should be no problem, but don't underestimate Kansas State. They will fight and claw to the end. Virginia has the rarest opportunity of getting themselves to the ACC championship and winning. They have to get past Wake Forest, which I would not underestimate. They are a gritty team. They did get their ass beat by Florida State, so they're looking for a bounce back. They go to Duke. Duke is not easy. They do not take things lightly. They will fight them to the end as well too. And after a bye, they do host Vatek, but Vatek is not easy to deal with as well. They are I don't know who they are, but it's a rivalry game. It can get ugly pretty fast, pretty quick. Louisville, they host Cal, not to underestimate. They host Clemson, also not to underestimate. They go to SMU, who upsetted not only Miami, but also got Clemson. Also would not underestimate. And then they got Kentucky at the end. Kentucky has not looked great this season, but also not underestimate. If Louisville wants to get in position of being the second ACC team in the conference championship, they got to close out and not underestimate any of these teams on their schedule. Vanderbilt took a loss last week. They did try their best to fight to the end. They were one onside kick away from putting themselves in position of trying to tie and force overtime. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. They got outbested by talent level against Texas for about 3 quarters or so. They do get Auburn that fired Hugh Freeze. Then they got a bye. Then they host Kentucky, which I mean it should be no problem for them to beat. If they survive this long and find themselves in the top 10, they got to go to Tennessee. You know, Tennessee is rooting for Vandy to get back into the top 10 somehow because they really want this win badly. This will be the best closeout of the season for the state of Tennessee in the SEC with Vanderbilt and Tennessee. This could be one of the better SEC matchups as far as rankings go to kind of close things out. And then you got Miami, who suffered the loss. I'm sorry if anybody watched my clip or listened to my stuff. I kind of saw this coming with Miami. I just could not trust him. You can have Mario Cristobal all you want saying he's a good coach. I know about his history with FIU before, and then his history with Oregon, and it didn't work out so well. So I kind of figured this was going to happen too. Sorry, Miami, but it is what it is. But they could try to fight for a playoff spot at least. They just got to win out against Syracuse. Don't take NC State lightly. Then they go to Vautech. I kind of would not take them lightly, even though we don't know who they are. And then they got Pitt, which, I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Pitt. If Pitt can make a run right now, it gets much tougher for them. And then there's USC, who's got Northwestern at home, which surprisingly Northwestern's doing well, but that could end pretty damn quick. Then they host Iowa. It all depends on how Iowa does against Oregon, and if they somehow get a win against Oregon, then USC shouldn't take Iowa lightly. They're going to come in confident, wanting to play strong football and close things out. If they survive that one, they go to Oregon, and depending on what happens with Oregon against Iowa, then they man, this is really tough. This is really tough. This would be a tough matchup for the former Pac-12 teams to play up against. And then if USC gets this far without losing, they got UCLA. It might be assumed they could easily kick their butts and everything and just move out and get themselves into playoff position. But at the same time, they can find their way to falling apart against UCLA. UCLA could blindside them out of nowhere because of how tough USC had to play those first 3 games in November before having to play up against UCLA, not knowing if they're tired or beat up. It could go either way with it, so I kind of would watch out for that. Iowa has Oregon at home, a tough matchup, but with how they played last week, they can come in confident. And the fact that they came from an unranked to the top to number 20, kind of surprising, not surprising. I think Iowa kind of proved themselves that they can put themselves in a playoff position. I looked at their schedule, and they definitely have an opportunity of getting themselves into a playoff spot. If they're able to survive Oregon and then go to USC and survive them as well too, they just got Michigan, and then they got well, Nebraska, which I also would not underestimate. No matter how good or bad those teams are, they always play to the very end. They've had close games to where it came down to the very last possession of it, and it doesn't matter who wins this game. It's always come down to that very last possession. So this might be a close game once again. Who knows? Then we move on to Michigan. Michigan has a chance to close out their schedule before playing Ohio State. I would focus on beating Northwestern and then beating Maryland. I would not take those two teams lightly. We'll see how Northwestern is at this point, and then Maryland. I saw how they played a little bit. They got a bit of gumption. I can tell you that they got a good quarterback. They got a future in him. This roster might end up getting better at some point in the future. The coach has done a good job recruiting and it's starting to work out for him, but I would not take those teams lightly. And if they survive that long, they got Ohio State. And I would say this is the game that either gets into the postseason or eliminates them for the postseason. Then there's Missouri. I already explained this. Texas A&M is going to be a very tough matchup for them, and without Bo Prabula, it gets much tougher. So now they're going to really have to have the fans behind them, along with the defense and the run game, and hopefully the quarterback can build somewhat of a confidence to kind of get things going. They got to play all 60 minutes of the game and not half of it because A&M is very adaptable to any situation that they have played. Then they host Mississippi State, would not take them lightly. Then they go to Oklahoma. This might be their toughest. This might be their second toughest matchup. Depending on what happens with their situation, this is going to be a tough one, and Oklahoma's looking for bloody revenge against them. And then they go to Arkansas. At this point, if they somehow survive that schedule, don't take Arkansas lately. Arkansas is a very competitive team, even with that record being what it is. They are still pretty competitive. Washington, deservingly gets into the top 25. I expect them to make a run up to that Oregon game. They got Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got a good defense, but they got nothing on offense. They host Purdue. Should be no problem. They go to UCLA. Might be a tough, tricky one because they're looking at Oregon, so expect that to potentially be a trap game. If they survive, they got Oregon. This is at this point a playoff qualifying matchup, and Washington has to win this one to get themselves into that spot. If they can't, this is pretty much it for them. And then there's Pitt. A little bit surprising this season, but they are a good team. They had to swap quarterbacks, but it's worked out for them. Their offense has actually looked pretty damn good. They got a bye week. They got a bye week before they host Notre Dame. That's going to be an underrated good matchup to watch, honestly. And I would love to see where Pitt is against Notre Dame's defense and that team that's kind of gotten hot at the right time, despite the struggle against BC. Then, if they survive that, they go to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech is trying to get themselves into the ACC championship game. I would not take those guys lightly. This might be the most grittiest game that they face. And if they survive, they host Miami. Miami is kind of they're at this point they're kind of murky. We don't know who Miami is. This could be a competitive game, but in recent past that Miami has played down the stretch of the season, it has not gone well for them. And if Miami can somehow survive up to that point, we'll see where their mindset is when Pitt plays them. I don't know how Pitt's going to be at this point after Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. This might be good. This might be bad. Who knows? This is definitely a mystery matchup that we're going to have to see, and if they're both ranked at that time. Tennessee pretty much explained a little bit of it. They got New Mexico State after the bye. Who cares? They go to Florida. I kind of would not take that game lightly. If anything, that could be a trap game as well too, because they face Vanderbilt next week. So maybe that might be the trap game I think Tennessee should not overlook because with how they played against Oklahoma, they do have some weaknesses, especially on defense. But yeah, if they survive that long, they host Vandy. This definitely comes down to if Tennessee can try to get themselves back into the college football playoff conversation, if they can somehow survive, they could be the first three-loss team to get in, but this is going to take a lot of convincing, honestly. So they really need Vandy to get back into the top 10 to even be in that conversation for it. It's a tough stretch, though. Now that we got past the top 25, let's go back to the group of five. Now, these are the ones in green that are the group of five that I see that have a chance of making the college football playoff. Memphis lost to UAB, but they got a big win off of USF. So that helps them. Navy was undefeated before they lost to North Texas. Man, that shirtless section was awesome. I loved it. I loved every second of it. That kind of helped motivate that team a little bit, especially the defense that was kind of backed up in their own red zone. And seeing those guys just take off their shirts and just twirl them and just cheer and everything, that was great, man. I loved every second of it. North Texas has been kind of like my favorite team to watch this season with Drew Mestemaker and those skilled positions at the running back position and the wide receiver position. I've had a great time watching that game, man, and that team this season. I'm kind of hoping they do make a surprising run to the AAC championship, but going back to this, they got to. I don't know what's going to happen. They just got to clear out their schedule. We'll explain that in a moment. Then there's Tulane. They lost 2 games this season. Who did they lose to? They lost to someone last week. Shoot, I do not remember who they lost to last week, but that was a pretty disappointing loss by them. So at this point, they're kind of eliminated from the college football playoff conversation for now. And I'm just saying this for now because you got San Diego State mixed into it, and then you got James Madison mixed into it. And even for USF, they lost their second game of the season, but they still have a good resume. They could still work their way into trying to get into the college football playoff with 2 losses and with a good resume. But it is a tough stretch. They have to win out. They gotta hope. They gotta hope they get a little bit of help. I don't know where the standings will be by the time the regular season ends, but USF still has the highest chance of getting themselves into the conference championship, but they need Navy to lose another one and at least keep themselves above everybody else to try to put themselves in position for the conference championship at least. Then there's San Diego State that has been playing great football. I love, like, my mom would love to hear that. They only have 1 loss, which was no big deal at this point. They've done their job. They have a good defense. Their quarterback, Denigal, is looking pretty good at this point. They needed a quarterback to have an answer, and it's making their offense look at least relevant enough to be able to get themselves into that conversation. And then James Madison don't have a really convincing resume. They only lost to NC State. It took the second quarter for them to lose. They were tied with them for a while. They had opportunities, but then their offense got stifled. NC State took advantage of it and ended up winning. But that resume is going to help them a little bit because NC State has upsetted a couple of teams this season. So there is a chance James Madison can work themselves in. They're my college football playoff pick of the group of 5 team, but they're going to really have to hope there's a lot of chaos in the AAC and they pretty much cannibalize themselves. I don't know where they're at with San Diego State. They probably have a better resume than them, but the fact that San Diego State has looked good, they may need another loss by them. So this is pretty much what I have at this point. Um, I'm looking at this schedule, and it just feels like every week is going to be a college football playoff elimination week. I mean, there has been no runaway outside of Ohio State and Indiana unless they somehow F their way out before getting to the end of the regular season or the college football, not the college football playoff, but the Big Ten championship. I think at this point they're the only 2 teams in their conference that's pretty much a runaway. The SEC is pretty much gonna still have gonna still have pretty much no runaway until the last week of the season. Like I said, Texas has to run through their schedule and beat Texas A&M. Oklahoma has to clear out their schedule. Georgia has to be able to survive and clear out their schedule. Ole Miss has no problem clearing out theirs, but they should not overlook Mississippi State. There's just so many things happening. Even Texas Tech and BYU, that game's probably going to decide who officially gets into the Big 12 Conference Championship and also being a conference championship preview. So it's unpredictable right now. And I love this because this is something that we need. We've always had teams that were always dominant and they've always gotten themselves to the college football playoffs after winning the conference championship outrightly with no competition, but it's just like nobody else has a chance. Nobody else has a say. Nobody else is being looked at. But now this is a new world. This is a new era, and I love this, man. Like this is a much different situation than it was in the past. The fact that Pitt's in the top 25. Iowa goes from being unranked in the AP poll just days before jumping into the top 20. We're seeing Virginia as the highest ACC team in the top 25 CFP rankings, which we never hear about. And then you got the state of Utah in the Big 12 that's holding up the top 13 spots. Like, this is insane, man. Like, this is great. And then the fact that, going back to Texas, they got two of the top 10 teams they can clear out to get themselves into maybe the SEC championship, but for guaranteed sure they'll be in the playoff. Oklahoma in that same situation. They can get themselves in if they clear out their schedule. So anything could happen in the last month of this season. And then wanted to find out to see what the conference championship is going to look like, if it's a guarantee or not. So honestly, man, I'm looking forward to this. This has been a great year of college football, and I'm glad I got to go to a couple of games, like at home with Nevada, and then going to the Holy War game just to kind of get an idea who BYU and Utah is, just like up in person, outside of watching them on TV and just looking into their resume and their statistics. So I'm happy about where this has been, and I expect more unpredictability and chaos as this month goes through. Now that I'm done with college football, I can't wait to explain more next week about it. Let's go into the NFL a little bit. And you see what's right below me, that picture right there with Jerry Jones and Stephen A. Smith. I was a little surprised that Stephen A. step into that, I guess the suites or something, and is hanging out with Jerry Jones. I was even told that Stephen A. did an interview with Jerry Jones as well too. I was a little surprised. Their I didn't watch their interview, but I plan on doing that sometime after I'm done with this podcast. But holy crap, man. I've heard plenty of things about what happened with it, but I mean, Stephen A already knows how Jerry Jones is and how the Cowboys are. It's no surprise. And how that game went yesterday, and I picked the Cardinals to win that game too. Oh boy. Oh, the Cowboys have a lot to answer for. But they did make moves. They got Logan Wilson from Cincinnati, and they got Quentin Williams from New York, which I was fucking surprised about. So does that do enough to kind of turn their defense around just a little bit? Maybe. They made moves like they got Kenny Clark. Um Izarike, I'm trying to pronounce the name Izarike. He was from Boston College. He was one of the sack kings in the ACC, and now he's kind of showing up a little bit. In his, I think his second year, first year, second. No, he's a rookie in his first year with the Cowboys, and it's like I was kind of hoping him and Micah would have been kind of like you know opposite sides, kind of causing some chaos and stuff before Micah Parsons got traded. But you know, I don't know how this defense is going to be going forward, but we know for sure the offense is good. But how they played against the Cardinals, they didn't even score a touchdown until like the fourth quarter or so. Their first touchdown was from special teams, which was like really surprising with how everything has gone. Dallas definitely needs some help if they want to even try to get into the NFL playoff spot, at least at number 7. But right now, the Cowboys are kind of reeling after that loss yesterday. It's like not only did they lose to the Panthers, but they lose to the Cardinals the way they did. Like, dude, come on, man. How much more do we need to go through this? And I talked about this. I talked about this to myself at work. Like, I saw one of the posts from a couple of my buddies on Instagram, and it has something to do with the Cowboys losing and, the whole situation with the offense, how the Cardinals did, and then Marvin Harrison, I guess, going all over Deron Bland and CeeDee Lamb being like, ooh, damn, dude, and everything. And I'm just like, Jerry Jones is trying to find answers with everything. I don't know what he was thinking. But in my head, I was just bullshitting with myself. I feel like Jerry Jones was just starving and he was craving like a bag of chips or something like that going into the office. And he's like, you know what? I wonder if there's a chance I could trade for a bag of chips amongst 31 other teams. And after trying to make a call to the other 30 teams that couldn't trade a bag of chips to him, I don't know. They come to Green Bay because he's like, well, the cheese chips and all that stuff. It's got to come from Green Bay. I think Green Bay will be willing to trade a bag of cheese chips. That would be from 7-Eleven or something like that. I'm gonna see if they're willing to make a trade with me. And he, out of nowhere, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know what he was thinking. Micah Parsons could have probably been the first thing popped up because he was not happy of how the conversation went. And after thinking, okay, we're good. And unfortunately, they're not good. Micah Parsons talking shit. So at this point, he's like, I'm willing to trade you, Micah Parsons, for a bag of chips, a bag of $5 chips from 7-Eleven. And Green Bay's like, you bullshitting with us, right? Like Gutekunst is, I think Gutekunst, right? Gutekunst is like, you bullshitting with me, right? Jerry Jones is like, no, no, no. I'll put Micah Parsons on the trade table, and I'll trade him for a bag of chips. Do you want us to throw? Can we throw Kenny Clark into that situation? I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck if you throw in a box of Swiss cheese or whatever. I want a goddamn $5 bag of chips, man. You hearing me out? And Green Bay's like, done deal. Bag of chips and Kenny Clark. Somebody get this man a bag of $5 chips from 7-Eleven and deliver it straight to him along with Kenny Clark. They trade us Micah Parsons for him. We got this deal. And that's pretty much it. Maybe that's the truth. Maybe that's what happened with the trade, and he just does not want to admit it. Maybe Stephen A knows that he overheard it was a bag of chips. I'm bullshitting this whole conversation, but maybe that's what happened. Jerry Jones traded Michael Parsons for a bag of fucking $5 7-Eleven chips. That's what happened. I'm putting that on that note. God, I hope I interview Jerry Jones someday. I hope I run into him someday when I go to Arlington. I don't know. Maybe I'll run into him someday, maybe at 7-Eleven, trying to get himself some $5 bag of chips. Okay, I'm bullshitting. All right, I'm done with this. The 49ers and the Oklahoma Sooners did get a win. I was really happy, even though I was a little nerve wracked, especially over that Saturday game against Tennessee. I didn't know what was going to happen with it. But at this point, I'm cautiously optimistic until I'm not anymore. It's going to come down to Alabama in 2 weeks, but right now I'm an LSU fan to wear their asses out. But yeah, next week I plan on hopefully being back on here for Tuesday after the CFP rankings week 2, and then I'll give my reaction over it, and then I'll probably cut it down a little bit on the remaining schedule and just talk scenarios. I love scenarios. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me. This was a little bit earlier than usual for me to come on and do the podcasting for it, but I figure I'd just throw it out there while I'm here. And then if you've seen this, I just got this Pudge T-shirt. If anybody even watched my video from like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they talked about Pudge, the Bowling Green cat, and God, he became my favorite cat ever since then. I wish I had a cat like Pudge. He was awesome. But yeah, hope y'all have a good morning, day, night, wherever you are listening to this on any day, whatever. And also happy daylight savings going backwards for I'm hoping people got like an extra hour of sleep. I feel really good after that daylight savings went backwards because I felt a little bit off even before then. I don't know what it was about, but once it went backwards, I felt more refreshed. I know some people don't like it. It kind of f's up their time schedule a little bit, their body schedule. And then I had a few coworkers that worked overnight that had to work an extra hour, unfortunately. But I did ask if they did get an overtime for it, and yes, they did. So glad everything worked out for it. But yeah, whatever you got to do, just adjust yourself to the clock. Just knowing you have an extra hour to do whatever you got to do, and if you have to get an extra hour of sleep, just get your extra hour of sleep. Don't complain about that. And for those who had to work an extra hour, you got the extra pay. So hopefully you are getting some sleep after that. But yeah, I'm done here. I'll be back on next week, next Tuesday for this, hopefully. And hopefully construction at my apartment is done because this is annoying as shit with it. But I'm not going to go into a tangent over it. But yeah, peace out, guys. Have a great night or morning or day or whatever.